Namaste, friends. We're speaking to you from our wonderful Guru Prem Ashram in Gurgaon, and it's a joy for us to share with you. And we know that people join us from not only here in the NCR area, but throughout India and also other places in the world. So we want to thank all of you for joining us today, and we hope we'll be able to share some things that are helpful to you. We also have some friends with us live in the room, so it helps to have that energy with us as well. Our topic today is really something very, very central to Master's mission. And we could say it in a lot of different ways, but the core of it is how to be happy all the time. And the search for happiness in life is, one might say, the core of all existence. Master said all humanity is motivated by the twin-fold desire to avoid suffering and find happiness. And so the great gift that our Guruji, Yoganandaji, gave us the gift was tools and techniques that help us to both experience happiness within ourselves and also to help us to realize where to look for true lasting happiness, that it will not be found in the world around us, that it will not be found in things, that it will not be found in pleasant experiences, but that the source of happiness begins within ourselves. And then when we cultivate that through right attitude, through meditation, then we are able to have a stability, a constant presence of a level of joy within our lives that nothing can change, nothing can take away. And so really the teachings of our master and our line of gurus is the secret to unlock the door that all of humanity is trying so desperately to open, the door that leads to true and lasting happiness. So what Jyotish ji and I will be sharing in the next hour with you are some thoughts based on our Guruji's teachings, some practices you can do, and hopefully some energy and motivation to make changes in your life in areas where you are not finding happiness, where your life seems not to be working for you. So we hope it will be helpful. And we'll start first with Jyotish, and I'm going to pass the little magic microphone over to him.
Okay, now I have the magic microphone, so I feel very happy. What Devi said is really the key to having happiness that is more constant. And that's that we need to shift our goal of where, or the field where we're looking for happiness, from outside of ourselves to inside of ourselves. When we seek it on the outside, first of all, we cannot control the conditions outside of ourselves. So we're constantly then moving between, I like this, I don't like this, I like this, I don't like this. Just think of maybe driving in traffic. You like it when a lane opens up and you can zoom ahead a little ways, and then you don't like it when somebody pulls in front of you. Then you like it again when the traffic opens up, and constantly there's I like it, I don't like it, and so what it is it's little wavelets of I'm happy, I'm unhappy, I'm happy, I'm unhappy, I'm happy, I'm not happy. And as long as we live in that realm, there will never be any constancy to our ability to be happy. we're dependent on things that we have no control over. Now that's a tiny little example, but if you were to really stop and analyze what your search for happiness has been, the major themes that you've had in your life, seeking a higher education, seeking a job, seeking success at work, seeking a partner, seeking, always thinking that something will give you happiness, and in fact, no thing will ever give us happiness. What we're really doing is we're reacting. Just as we're reacting to the traffic patterns, we're reacting to those more major aspects of our life. And so it's our reaction that will either make us happy or unhappy. When we react positively, we're happy. When we react negatively, we're unhappy. And so are we always going to be just at the whim of fate that, like an ocean wave, is up and down, up and down? We will be as long as we seek outside of ourselves. But as soon as we begin to understand the central message of the spiritual path, which is what we're seeking lies within, not without. And Master began by saying what we're seeking is happiness. Ultimately, by understanding that that lies within ourselves, controlling the reactive process, we will begin to find that it's not really happiness, because happiness comes and goes, but it's joy that we're really after. I heard someone once define joy as happiness without a cause. That's not a really good definition of joy, but at least it's a directional definition of joy, because typically happiness, as I say, depends upon our reaction to something outside of ourselves. But when we can have happiness without a cause outside of ourselves, then at least we're moving, if not to real joy, at least to the constancy of happiness. Those who have practiced meditation, and especially Kriya Yoga, that teaches us to control those reactive processes, those people are happier. When people come to any of the Ananda communities or Ananda centers, they see a lot of happy people. And at first, sometimes visitors will think, I don't really believe this. People can't be happy like this. They're probably faking all those smiles. And then after 2 or 3 or 4 days of seeing that they're still smiling and they're still happy, they realize, well, they can't be faking it for that long. Maybe they really are happy. And Swami one time said something very important. He said that when you see a person who's happy or successful or has an uplifted consciousness, the mind tends to think, well, it's because that person is special. He was born that way, or his parents trained him properly and he's special. But Swami said, when you see a whole group of people who have qualities that you admire, you can't say, well, they're all special. But what you can say is there must be something that they're doing that produces that result. And what they're doing, in our case, is we are learning through meditation and the practice of Kriya Yoga to control the reactive process in the spine, which is where it originates. Swami said that, Swami Kriyananda said that even our body language will show whether the energy is rising in the spine or falling in the spine. For instance, you never see someone like this saying, I am so happy, or someone looking like this and saying, I'm miserable. Our body language, when we sit up straight, when we When the energy is rising, we tend naturally to stand up straight, the eyes will become uplifted. Master actually said that if you can't smile in any other way, take the corners of your mouth and push them up so that you smile. And of course, it sounded a little absurd, but neuroscientists have figured out that there is a connection between the musculature and the brain and the mood. And so actually moving your mouth in a smile, even when you're not happy, will help produce a movement of energy that will lead toward happiness. Now I want to do something a little bit different. And this is something that Swamiji did year after year, month after month. And that is that whenever he wrote something or was in the process of writing a book, he would call people from the community and have them come, and then he would read them that chapter or that section. Well, as you know, Devi and I write a blog each week, and this morning, this week is my turn to do the blog, and so this morning I wrote my blog. And so in the tradition of Swami, I'm going to read that for you.
You might say that they've been compiled into a touch of light.
Yes, Devi says to remind you that the blogs for the first year and a half up until the end of 2014 have been compiled into a book called A Touch of Light. And you can also get a weekly reminder, and the blog, it's on our website, jyotishanddevi.org. You can go there and just sign up and get a reminder each week that the new blog is out. But you are a super special group tonight because you're going to get the unpublished pre-release version of it. Now, we don't have a printer here that's handy, so I'm going to do the modern method of it and read it off of my iPad. Okay, here we go. So this week's blog is called The 1% Solution. This morning, Devi and I spoke with someone who was feeling overwhelmed and a little guilty because he couldn't keep up with all the should-dos on the spiritual path. I doubt if there is a devotee alive who hasn't had these same thoughts. On the one hand, there are hundreds of techniques, habits, and attitudes that could be helpful. On the other hand, we have to face the reality of living in this world with multiple responsibilities and limited time. Paramahansa Yogananda presented us with a great variety of teachings and techniques. Because of his great magnetism and enthusiasm, they all seem to be good and many essential in the quest for self-realization. Yet he also said, if you do 1/100th of what I suggest, you will find God. This is so reassuring. It keeps us from feeling so inundated or overwhelmed that we just give up. A friend recently shared something that can help us keep moving ahead. He said that some years ago, the British national cycling team wanted to improve their world ranking. They hoped to become the top team within 5 years. The coach came upon this solution. We will improve everything we do by at least 1%. They looked at their equipment, bikes, wheels, helmets, and other gear. They re-examined their training, diet, and even got better pillows. They revised their racing strategies and, well, you get the point. They did not achieve the goal of being the best in the world in 5 years. It took them only 3. If we apply this strategy to our spiritual practices, it will yield great results. First, try to optimize some easily changed physical areas such as your meditation room, altar, meditation seat, malas, and other equipment. Improving some of these things may take very little effort and, once done, won't need much attention. Try to improve every little thing you can think of by at least 1%. Then move on to important habits, such as regular meditation times and length, good posture, diaphragmatic breathing, starting each meditation with deep relaxation and concentration, and ending with a sense of expansion and joy. These may take more effort to improve and will need to be revisited regularly. But here again, if success is judged by making only small improvements, it can be accomplished relatively easily. Finally, let's look at the really important things: deep devotion, faith, non-attachment, and surrender to God's will. These are the areas that bring self-realization. There are also places where the 1% solution can make a big difference. If we just keep taking a step at a time, we will eventually arrive at our goal. As the great householder avatar, Lahiri Mahashaya said, Banat, Banat, Banjai, doing, one day done. In celebration of little steps, Nayaswamis Jyotish. So that's the pre-release. Now, what was being addressed there is a problem that many of us face on the spiritual path. And that's that we feel that there is so much to be done, so many techniques. We're supposed to meditate deeply, and we're supposed to meditate long, and we're supposed to attend satsangs and read and do all these things, that we feel overwhelmed, or more commonly, we simply feel overwhelmed by life itself. There are so many things to do. Devi and I can't tell you the number of times we've heard people say, I feel so badly, but I just can't find time to meditate regularly. Or I get started, as someone said, I flirt with meditation. I get started and then I drop and forget it for long periods of time. Then I come back to it, and so on. We get overwhelmed by having to try to balance all of these things, and yet maintain somehow a standard of a nice living standard for our family, for our children, for those around us that are dependent upon us. At any rate, as I said in the blog, well, you get the point. We get overwhelmed by life. And it does not help to think of meditation as one more burden that we have to do, one more task, one more responsibility that is piled on top of all the other responsibilities. But we should rather think of meditation and the spiritual life as the release of tension, not more tension. And so many times we have a feeling that there are so many things that need our attention that we just can't take care of all of them. And so what I was suggesting here is that we don't try to take care of all of them, and we don't try to achieve perfection in them. We just make little incremental steps, and that's not hard to do, and it can be relaxing and rewarding just to have those little incremental steps that don't take much effort. And then the second aspect of it is, don't judge yourself too harshly. So often we project upon Master this kind of judgmental attitude that is really coming only from our own conscience or our own sense of inadequacy, and we think, oh, Master must not be pleased with me. Maybe Master doesn't love me. Master doesn't care about me anymore because I didn't meditate for an hour and a half this morning, and I've disappointed him. Master, all he wants is for us to be happy. That's where we started out talking this evening. So just the attempt to be happy, the acceptance of the fact that we're trying, and trying is enough as long as we keep making tiny little improvements. One of the things that Master said that, frankly, it used to kind of frighten and bother me is he said, every meditation should be deeper than the one before it. Maybe you've read that or heard it. I thought, oh my God, how can I do that? I have up days and down days. I have good meditations and I have bad meditations, and I try to have a good meditation, but sometimes the mind is just unruly, or there are a lot of restless thoughts. Maybe I have a lot of projects. Maybe I have a blog due, and I'm worried about that. And so the mind is not in a place that it can meditate deeply. And then if I add on to not having a very good meditation, the thought, oh, I've disappointed Master this time. This one was definitely not better than the one before. And now Master's mad at me because I didn't follow what he said. That's all just nonsense. Master was just trying to get us to keep trying to make little incremental steps. You know, I have been for a long time, most of my adult life, I have been a runner. And now I can't even say running anymore. Jogging at a slow pace is about all I can manage. But when I was younger, I used to run at a fairly rapid pace, and I ran several marathons. And so I was a fairly serious runner. But there were some pieces of advice that were very good for a runner, especially competitive runner. One of them was, in your training, never run competitively for both time and distance. Either choose a distance that you're going to run or a time that you're going to run, but if you try to do both at the same time, you'll keep racing and racing, and eventually you will begin to exhaust yourself, and your training will actually begin to move you to retard your progress. Well, it's the same with meditation. Don't try to put pressure on yourself all the time in meditation. It should be relaxing. It should be fun. It should be enjoyable. You should come away from a good meditation with the feeling that that was nice. I've helped myself. I feel better than when I started. And so just take it a little bit easy. And then in terms of effort, this is one of the best pieces of advice that I ever got in terms of running. So the question of runners, the question of meditators is, how much effort is enough? And runners have all these complicated tables and diagrams and graphs and all of that. Maybe some meditators do too. I knew somebody who had a sadhana chart, meaning that they had listed what they were trying to do, and then they would check it off each day. And most people, it can be helpful. You have 3, 4, 6 things, and you check off. Yes, I had good posture today, or I meditated for the length of time. Well, this person had about 35 things on their sadhana chart, and I saw it on their pasted to their refrigerator. And the first day they had checked off all 35. And the second day they'd checked off about 30. And it went fewer and fewer until about midway through the month they ceased to check off anything at all. It just overwhelmed them. And so how much effort is enough effort? Here was the advice for runners. If you feel like you're making an effort, you're making an effort. Just that simple. If you feel in meditation that you're trying, you're trying. It's really that simple. And Master watches the heart. All he cares is not that we're trying in order to please him, but that we're doing something that will benefit ourselves. Because ultimately, what we're all seeking is, as we said at the beginning, how to be happy all the time. And retraining the mind, retraining the habits, retraining the reactive process, little by little, 1%, even if you had improved 1% each month or each year even in these different areas, it would be a vast improvement over where you started. And so if you're trying, that's enough. Master will read the heart, and he will come in and add his effort or his grace, because for him it's not effort anymore, but he will add his grace to our own efforts. Really what we demonstrate by making the effort is that this is what we really want. Anandamori Ma said a beautiful thing. She said, God is not a merchant. He will not respond to you trying to please him by doing so many rounds of japa, so many meditations, so many mantras or any of that. He's not a merchant. He can't be bought. And she said, in fact, you are not even doing the sadhana that you think you're doing. God is doing that sadhana, trying to find God. It's a kind of a conundrum. So it's God doing the sadhana that is supposed to help God find God. And so it's that little veil of hypnotism, one might say, where the soul, which is already happy and already free, is attached to or limited to the ego, this body and personality, and in its limited form, we seek happiness outside of ourselves when the soul already has all the happiness it can handle. It's saturated with it. And so we just need to keep this process going on, to keep doing our little part, to do the best that we can, to relax, to accept ourselves, to accept others, to love ourselves, to love others, but most of all, to love God, because in fact, God is all there is. Okay, now I pass the magic wand to Devi.
Hello again. You know, I'd like to start off just by a word of encouragement to everyone, because so often, as Jyotish has been saying, as devotees, we are very hard on ourselves. And we were recently in visiting our community outside of Assisi, Italy, and I noticed one of my friends was wearing a t-shirt with some words printed on it, and it took me a moment to understand what it was. In fact, I had to ask her to explain, and then it was so evident. It just simply said, 1 in 1,000. And then I said, what does that refer to? And she said, well, you know, it says in the Bhagavad Gita, out of 1,000, one seeks me. And out of 1,000 who seeks me, one perhaps finds me. And so we need to really understand. So our friend had a t-shirt that said 1 in 1,000. I didn't ask her which part of the equation she fell on. But it's so important to realize that we need to, with all humility, really understand that we have very, very, very good karma, as Master said, to even want to know God. And we are so scrupulous about, oh, I didn't do enough kriyas, or I didn't do all the different little, not that kriya is little, but I didn't follow through on what my goals were. But to understand that out of 1,000 people, one seeks, Out of 1,000 that seek, one perhaps find. But Master gave us some very reassuring advice. He said, our percentages are better. So out of 1,000 who seek God with Master's grace, more than just one will find. So just to understand that, and that in itself can be a cause of happiness. I, from time to time, this lovely thought comes in my mind, and I hold on to it, cling to it actually, that whatever my strengths may be, whatever my inadequacies are as a devotee, I am a disciple of a great guru. And that's really all that's important in this lifetime. We try our best, but ultimately it's not by our efforts that we find God, but it's through the efforts of the guru and God on as the guru is a channel for God. So again, thinking of how do we move forward in achieving this constant state of happiness? And you may think, sometimes people say, oh, that's, kind of a impossible dream. In fact, once we were showing the movie Finding Happiness, which probably most of you have seen. If not, I hope you can see it soon, about the Ananda communities worldwide. And a little girl in the audience afterwards raised her hand and said, that isn't really true, is it? And we said, it really is true. And it's hard for people to accept that. But Master talked about that dream he had, or a vision really, where he was in a very dusty, crowded marketplace. And there were just people packed together and shopping and selling and tending their children and all the things that happen in a little village marketplace. And every once in a while he would notice someone would kind of walk to the outskirts of the marketplace and look up with hope, and then they would sigh and come back to the crowded marketplace. And finally, Master, in this vision, wondered what they were all looking at. And he himself went out to the outskirts of the marketplace, and he looked up and he saw a beautiful, beautiful mountain. And he knew that that mountain represented the state of divine bliss. And all of his heart and all of his yearning wanted to climb that mountain. But just as everyone else before him in that marketplace, he looked up and he thought, oh, but it's too high. It's too high for me. I can't reach the summit of that. But then for all of us, because he was already an avatar, he resolved that quickly within himself, and he said, well, maybe I can't make it to the top, but I can take the first step. And maybe we can't make it to the top of the high mountain of experiencing the bliss of God, but it is a directional experience, and we can start taking the steps that lead us to that mountaintop. And the beautiful thing is, every step we take is rewarding in and of itself. So it isn't like we have to wait till we're at the mountaintop before we find a higher state of consciousness, before we find more fulfillment or satisfaction in life. Every step of the way is something that is worth having, worth putting our energy out, worth making the effort for. And so I'd like to share some thoughts based on Master's teachings about practical things we can do to live more in a state of happiness, starting on the physical level, the emotional level, attitudinal and mental level, and then spiritual level. And one of the things that Master's path is so rewarding, one of the things about which Master's path is so rewarding are all the practical tools he gave us. And sometimes people say, well, that's all that mysticism, that doesn't really work in the in the practical world. And Master replied, I'm not sure my path is a mystical path. I think it's a very practical path, and that seeking the happiness of God is the most practical thing we can do. And surely that's true, because everything else betrays our happiness. When we try to seek happiness in the things of the world, it betrays us, and we never find our fulfillment there. I don't know what the source of this experience was for me, but I think maybe the only conclusion I can come to as I get older is that I understood and had been schooled in the teachings of the yogis and of Vedanta in many lives before this one, because I remember as a little girl growing up in the West, I would, quite young, under 5 years old, because it was in a house we lived in, I would have a reoccurring dream every night. And in that dream, I would see a beautiful dish of ice cream. And I guess as in the little child's mind, that represented ultimate happiness. And I would reach out for that beautiful dish of ice cream, and I would get it, and then it would just melt in my hands, and there would be nothing there. And I would have that dream over and over again. And I think on some subconscious level of my mind, there was already established the awareness that the things of this world, the happiness, the bright promises, and the beautiful aura of satisfaction that surrounds something like a dish of ice cream, or as we get older, a beautiful new car or a new house, all of those things. We reach for them, and when we get them, they just are like water running through our hands. So what are some practical things we can do? First of all, let's start on the physical level. You know, a sense of health and well-being and vitality and balance, all of these things very much affect the mind and our outlook. So Master gave us techniques like the energization techniques, which so often people say, oh, I don't have time to do those. I'm in such a rush. Well, to be honest with you, for many years I fell into that delusion. Oh, they're not that important. Oh, I'd rather spend the time in meditation or doing Kriya. But somewhere along the line, Master hit me over the head with the 2x4 and said, you're making a big mistake by ignoring these things. And I began doing them every day, as regularly as I could. And to overcome the thought that, oh, I don't have the time to do it, I would set a little kitchen timer. And I would say, I'm going to set it for 10 minutes. And that's how long it takes me to do these energization exercises. So it would drive the point home in my mind. They don't take so long if you do them with focus and attention. And then I thought, okay, if it's 10 minutes less that I have for meditation, then I'll use that time with even more concentration. So it really was an effective little trick that I used on myself. And I find when I do energize before I meditate, it changes the whole balance of the day. It awakens the energy that you go through the day with vitality and joy. And it also deepens your awareness of the inner flows of energy. So yes, the practice of energization exercises. Master also spoke at length about the value of right diet. And for those of you who are familiar, he gave us a wonderful 9-day cleansing diet, which is a wonderful, if you're looking for this, you can, more information, you can go onto our website or write our Ananda centers and they can share it with you. But it's really a wonderful way of detoxing the body. And then recently, one of our acharyas at Ananda Village, Dr. Peter Van Houten, who's a Kriya Acharya, a wonderful teacher, and a medical physician, he said, you know, years ago I read Master's recommendations for what food we should eat in our daily diet. And again, if you're interested in that, we can make this available to you. And Dr. Peter we call him that because he's both our physician and our friend, Dr. Peter said, you know, I used to think, well, that's sort of quaint, that's pleasant, what Master recommended. But he said the cutting edge research in the medical field in the West, and I think it's probably will spread globally, is the kind of diet, the foods on Master's daily diet recommendations are exactly what the medical world is now recommending. Fresh fruits, fresh vegetables, cultured milk, clabbered milk as he called it, dahi and so forth, but whole grains. And it's amazing how and more medical research is showing that toxins in the digestive tract produce mental states, negative mental states. And again, if you try fasting 1 day a week, which Master recommended too, fasting 1 day a week and 3 days a month, at first you're a little hungry, but you find when you wake up after a day of fasting, your mind is so clear. Maybe you feel a little hungry, as I said, but it is a far less experience than the sense of well-being. So all of these are things that affect our mental and emotional outlook. So if the body is healthy, if we're feeling a vital flow of life force, we're able to look at life and just with a positive outlook. Now, emotionally, we also, as Jyotish mentioned earlier, so much of what goes on in life is simply reacting positively and negatively. Years ago, Jyotish and I were teaching at our retreat at Ananda Village, the Expanding Light. We were teaching a yoga teacher training course. And as a little fun exercise, we had all of the students do a little skit, put on a little play, and just for fun entertainment one night. And one of the fellows created this skit called A Day in the Life of a Nanda Yoga Teacher. And it started off, the alarm clock goes off and, oh, I don't want to have to get up now. And then, but I'll feel better if I go and meditate. And then he meditates and then goes into breakfast. And oh, good, they have oatmeal. I love oatmeal. Oh, darn, they put raisins in the oatmeal. I don't like raisins. And the whole day was back and forth. I like, I don't like, I like, I don't like. And he was trying to demonstrate that principle in a very amusing way. But it's a good way to analyze your own life. Look at the emotional reactions that you have throughout the day. Positive, negative, and just say, why go there? Why not, Jyotish was talking about finding the way through traffic. Why not leap over the traffic and say, if a lane opens up, if it doesn't open up, emotionally, I am going to rise above the fluctuations of the vicissitudes, the changing experiences of this world. It's really the only thing that will help us to find that stability. Once we often talk about fires at Ananda Village. Well, we live, Ananda Village is in California, and we're famous for many things in California, beautiful beaches and sunshine and Hollywood and lovely, lovely things. But we're also famous for our fires, and Ananda has had its share of them. And one year, in the early days, we had a lovely little geodesic dome temple up at our meditation retreat. And someone had been meditating in there in the evening and left a candle burning, and it caught fire on the altar, and the temple burnt to the ground. And fortunately, it was contained to that. It didn't spread beyond that. But Swamiji said, as soon as he found out, first he thought, oh, Divine Mother, he went into a negative state. He thought, why did you take our temple? We've worked so hard for this. And then he sat down and he said, I'm not going to let this take away my inner joy. And he sat to meditate and he said, Divine Mother, I built this temple for you. And if you want to take it, you take it. It's yours. And he sat there to meditate, and he felt so much bliss, overwhelming with joy. And Swami said, kind of teasingly, I said to Divine Mother, do you want to take the kitchen dome too? Because he felt so much joy of offering up what might have been a negative experience. And so to really, we need to take charge. So most people in the world are like little ping pong balls or badminton. I'm not sure what they call the little badminton birdie, the birdie, yeah, that flies back and forth. And it just, you get hit and you get back and forth. But if we say, I am tired of being hit back and forth, I am going to walk through this life where I determine my own level of happiness. Recently, we visited some friends of ours who are going through a very big life test. The wife was diagnosed with cancer, and they weren't sure how advanced it was, how serious it was. And of course, this is not a joyful experience. But we went to visit them in the hospital, and I was so inspired by being in their presence. I saw nothing in the wife's eyes or the husband's eyes but peace and faith in God and joy. And I just thought, whatever happens, they are going to be just fine. And if we have those attitudes as well, we're able to, it doesn't mean that everything will go well. We can't promise ourselves that, well, if I have the right attitude, all my challenges will go away. No, 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 that's merchant consciousness. You say, if I have the right attitude, that is its own reward. As Swami said, joy is not a reward, it is the solution. So you don't say, well, if I'm a good person, then I'll be happy. You think, no, I will be happy. I will live in a state of joy no matter what happens. And is this easy? Of course it's not easy. Of course it takes discipline, but is it worth it? Of course it's worth it, because then we become a cause in our own life. We determine what happens. And honestly, the more you become a cause in your life, the more everything works out for the best. I've seen this over and over again in my life. And I've seen it, Swami demonstrated it so beautifully. Was his life easy? By no means. Did he live in a state of constant joy and bliss? As far as I could tell, all the time. And that was through a life of disciplining his mind, disciplining his emotions, and choosing to live in happiness. When that, I mentioned the temple burning down, that later that day, we were with Swami, and he went into a little nearby store near to our community. And he went in, and after having this wonderful experience of bliss from Divine Mother, and he was whistling and singing. And the proprietor of the store, who knew what had happened, said, "You are singing?" She said, "When my house burned down, I cried for 3 months." And Swami said, "Well, we lost the temple. I haven't lost my singing voice." And, you know, and she was really surprised at that reaction. But we can also discipline our emotions, past emotions. It's, for example, we were talking with some friends recently, and one of them was saying how we were just sharing on a personal level, and she said, my mother was a very harsh woman. She was not very loving, not very kind, and I went through a lot of my life resenting her. And then finally, I got to the place after really offering up to God that I could just forgive her. And she said, so I was on that kind of scale, first resentment, and then really working at forgiveness. And then we talked about it a little more, and I said, but then we have to take it to the next octave and not just let it be focused on your mother and forgiving her, but move it towards unconditional love for everyone. That's the divine state. And we can look at so many of the emotional patterns that we have. Maybe we have a lot of guilt about ourselves. And, oh, I made mistakes, I did wrong things. Well, if we can move emotionally from guilt to self-acceptance, affirming that maybe I made mistakes, but as Sri Yukteswar said, the lives of all men are dark with many stains. All things in future will improve if we are making the right spiritual effort now. But so moving to self-acceptance, and then beyond that, the divine state of self-forgetfulness, where it just isn't important what we did, who we are, but we just forget ourselves in the contemplation of our love for God. And so to look at emotional patterns, whether it's anger, resentment, guilt, all of these things, and say, this is a chain around my leg, and it colors how I see the world. Let me break that chain by my own effort and then by God's grace. And I don't want any negative emotional patterns to hold me back. And then with the right attitudes, we can see how when we begin having positive thinking, as I said, it changes the world around us. We, before we left Ananda Village, which was in August, came to Italy for a month and now here in India, we, as a community, we decided to do an affirmation. It's one of Swamiji's affirmations on happiness, actually, positive thinking, excuse me, positive thinking from his book, Affirmations for Self-Healing. And I want to share it with you because I've been doing it regularly, a number of times a day since then, and it has a wonderful impact on your life. So the affirmation is simply this: my outward life is a reflection of my inner thoughts. Filled with the joy of God, I express His joy and harmony in everything I do. To make this more immediate to you, I'd like you to, let's do this together just as a mental affirmation. So sit up, focus at the point between the eyebrows, and just mentally repeat after me, and I'll do it several times. My outer life is a reflection of my inner thoughts. Filled with the joy of God, I express His joy and harmony in everything I do. Again, my outer life is a reflection of my inner thoughts. Filled with the joy of God, I express His joy and harmony in everything I do. One last time. My outer life is a reflection of my inner thoughts. Filled with the joy of God, I express His joy and harmony in everything I do. So this is a wonderful affirmation. And if we can fill our minds with the joy of God, then that spills over and it's reflected in everything around us. And then finally, and we'll close with these thoughts, how do you fill yourself with the joy of God? And that comes to all of Master's techniques on meditation, Hong Sa, Om, and Kriya Yoga, because it lifts our consciousness to the centers of higher awareness, whether we talk about the chakras and the astral body, or simply on a physical level, that research in neuroscience now shows that the prefrontal lobes of the brain are centers where we concentrate when we meditate. These are centers of joy and positive emotions. So it again reaffirms what the yogis and sages of down through the ages have taught us. If you want to be happy, then concentrate on the centers of divine God presence within you, the center of God within you, whether it's the heart chakra filled with the Anahat chakra filled with divine love, or the Kutastha, the center of cosmic consciousness. But these are the source of joy in the world and the source of joy within ourselves. If we seek it anywhere else, we will only be disappointed, and the fulfillment we find will be but a faint shadow of the true joy within ourselves. So, our dear friends who are with us today, we hope and pray that Master Awaken within you motivate you to put into practice all of these wonderful teachings. They work. And as Master said, and we should cling to this thought, no one goes home empty-handed. And so our prayer for all of you is that your hands, your heart, your mind, your whole being be filled with the true joy of God that nothing in this world can ever take away. Joy to you.
Joy to you.